The story begins in the 1700s with two wealthy English families, the Darwins and the Wedgwoods. The Wedgwoods were famous pottery makers. You might have heard of Wedgwood china. The Darwins were doctors and scientists. These two families became close friends, and over time they became much more than friends. Starting in 1764, members of these two families began marrying each other, and they kept doing it. Generation after generation. There were at least 5 direct marriages between the Darwin and Wedgwood families over about 80 years, but it was even more complicated than that. Within each family, cousins also married cousins. So you had Wedgwoods marrying Wedgwoods, and all of them were related to the Darwins through previous marriages. In one remarkable case, 2 Darwin siblings married 2 Wedgwood siblings at nearly the same time. Caroline Darwin married Josiah Wedgwood III in 1837. Then, 2 years later, her brother Charles married Josiah's sister Emma in 1839. Both couples were first cousins. The family tree became incredibly tangled, with the same names appearing over and over, connected by multiple bloodlines. Now, you might wonder, was this some kind of formal agreement? Did the families sit down and plan this out? The answer is no, not really. There's no written contract, no secret document hidden away. But here's what we do know. The families definitely encouraged these marriages. They hoped for them, they celebrated them, and they had very practical reasons for wanting them to happen. Money was a big part of it. When Caroline Darwin married Josiah Wedgwood III in 1837, it made financial sense. Her father had lent Josiah's father a lot of money. The marriage kept those debts in the family. It kept the wealth concentrated. This wasn't unusual for the time. Rich families in Victorian England often married within their social circle to protect their fortunes. But the Darwin-Wedgwood families took it further than most. They didn't just marry within their social class. They married within their own extended family, again and again, creating layer upon layer of shared ancestry. By the time Charles married Emma, they weren't just first cousins. They were related through multiple family lines, which meant they shared even more genetic material than typical first cousins would. But there was a problem. A serious problem that nobody fully understood at the time. When close relatives have children together, those children face higher risks. Much higher risks. Let me tell you what happened to Charles and Emma's children. They had 10 children together. 3 of them died before reaching their 10th birthday. That's a mortality rate of 30%. Little Mary Eleanor lived only 23 days. Annie, Darwin's beloved daughter, died at age 10 from tuberculosis. Her death devastated Charles. The youngest, Charles Waring, had Down syndrome and died at 18 months from scarlet fever. But it wasn't just the deaths. Of the 7 children who survived to adulthood, 3 remained childless despite being married. That's a 50% infertility rate among those who married. This was far above normal, even for that time period. Darwin himself began to suspect something was wrong. He wrote in a letter, "I now have 6 boys and 2 girls, and it is the great shadow over my happiness that they are not very robust." After Annie died, his worries grew stronger. He started doing experiments with plants, studying what happened when plants pollinated themselves versus when they cross-pollinated with other plants. The results were clear. Cross-pollination produced much healthier offspring. The irony is remarkable. Here was Charles Darwin, the man who discovered natural selection and evolution, the man who would change our understanding of life itself. and he was watching his own children suffer, possibly because of his marriage to his cousin. He even wrote to politicians, asking them to include questions about cousin marriages in the national census. He wanted to study the problem, but his request was denied. Modern science has proven Darwin's fears were justified. In 2010, researchers studied 25 families across 4 generations of the Darwin-Wedgwood dynasty. They looked at 176 children in total. 21 of them died before age 10. The scientists found something striking. The more closely related the parents were, the higher the child mortality rate. The statistics were clear and significant. Another study in 2015 found that inbreeding affected male fertility in the Darwin family. This explained why so many of Darwin's sons couldn't have children. It was the first study ever to prove that inbreeding causes fertility problems in human males. So, why did these families keep marrying each other? It wasn't just the Darwins and Wedgwoods. In Victorian England, about 4.5% of aristocratic marriages were between cousins. Among the wealthy, 1 in 5 marriages was within the extended family. This was considered normal, even desirable. Look at other European families. The Spanish Habsburgs were even worse. They married close relatives so often that their inbreeding coefficient reached 25% by the time of Charles II. That's incredibly high. The Spanish Habsburg line died out completely because they couldn't produce healthy heirs. They had the famous Habsburg jaw, a genetic deformity. Many had severe disabilities. The last Spanish Habsburg king couldn't even chew his food properly. Or consider the Rothschild banking family. They deliberately arranged over 20 marriages between cousins to keep their fortune in the family. Queen Victoria carried haemophilia, the bleeding disease, and it spread throughout European royal families because they all married each other. The Russian Tsarevich, the heir to the Russian throne, suffered from it. So did Spanish princes. The Darwin-Wedgwood pattern finally broke in the 4th generation. None of Charles Darwin's children married a Wedgwood. If there had been a rigid family agreement, you'd expect it to continue. But it didn't. His children and grandchildren married into other intellectual families instead. This shows there was flexibility. There were strong preferences, yes. Economic incentives, absolutely, but no ironclad rule. Despite all the tragedy, some of Darwin's children achieved remarkable things. 3 of his sons were knighted by Queen Victoria for their scientific contributions. Several became Fellows of the Royal Society, Britain's most prestigious scientific institution. His descendants contributed to science, music, and literature. So not everything was negative, but the cost in human suffering was real and measurable. Darwin's personal tragedy became part of his scientific legacy. His studies on inbreeding weren't just academic exercises. They were driven by personal pain. When he concluded that nature abhors constant self-fertilization, he was thinking about his own children. The knowledge he gained from his family's suffering helped shape modern genetics. It taught us why genetic diversity matters, why inbreeding is dangerous. Today we understand what Darwin could only suspect. When close relatives have children, recessive genetic problems become much more likely. Everyone carries some harmful genetic mutations, but they usually stay hidden. When both parents carry the same mutation, because they're related, their children can inherit both copies. That's when diseases and disabilities appear. This story illustrates something profound about human nature. What seemed rational and beneficial at the time carried hidden biological costs. The Victorian upper class thought they were being smart by marrying within their circle. They were protecting their wealth, their status, their way of life, but they were also unknowingly harming their children. Charles Darwin lived with this realization. He participated in the pattern and later came to regret it deeply. But from that regret came understanding. From his family's pain came knowledge that helps protect families today. It's a reminder that sometimes our social customs can conflict with our biological well-being. And it's a testament to Darwin's greatness that even in his personal tragedy he sought truth and tried to help others avoid the same fate.